This is take two, people. The first take footage turned out horrible, so I'm re-recording it, and I'm also going to split this up into three or four parts now. This will be about my experiences with school, and with high school in particular. There will be another video on college, and then a video about obsessions, relationships, and attachments that I've had, as well as if people are interested, they can send an email, and I'll explain that at the end. Going through high school with autism was, well, not just high school, sorry. Going through school with autism was really hard. I was constantly in trouble, and granted, sometimes I was set up, but not always. One of the first instances I can remember was me chasing a girl around who I wanted to date, and this would have been very early grade. I probably shouldn't have even known what a girl was at that point, other than they didn't look like me. And so I was chasing a girl, and I distinctly remember getting in trouble and talked to by a teacher. We knew, and when I say we, I mean my parents and I knew something was wrong in second grade. In second grade, I don't exactly remember if the teacher called me stupid. I don't remember what it was. But I actually ran away from the school. I ran to the one place where I knew I was safe and could be comforted, and it was my old babysitter. And that old babysitter just happened to live right across the street, so I ran over there, and my parents got a call stating that I couldn't, they could not come look for me across the street because I was off school grounds. So eventually I went back, and apparently, and this is what I heard from my mother, the teacher wanted me to apologize to her for running away, I believe. So I did, and then the teacher wanted me to apologize to the class. And my dad got a little irritated because he said that's not what I agreed to. Again, this is coming from my mom. I may have switched if it was the class or the teacher to apologize for. I don't totally remember this. I had to get some of this information from my mom and dad. But that led to me transferring to a different class, and that other class I was much happier with. So, and at that point, I will admit, the principal did come to my defense, as the principal said that she had worked with me before and never had any issues with me. So, that was kind of the start of things. One thing I would like to note is if somebody has autism or a disability of any kind, do not use the word "that's stupid." Don't tell them their work is stupid or anything like that, because when you use it in context to the person, that actually really hurts, because technically autism and Asperger's syndrome, it is a mental disability. So the word that I absolutely hate the most is retarded. I hate that word. And whenever I hear it used, it makes me cringe. Part of that is because that's what I was called through school, and technically, yes, people with autism, Asperger's syndrome are, but to me, it's a slur. It's a bad word. And I use the F word liberally. There is not much that offends me. That one word, that offends me. So from second grade, I moved on. I don't really remember much about third grade. I do remember fourth grade, where I had an issue where I don't remember why I was so frustrated. But I was extremely frustrated, I think because I couldn't get an answer to a question, that I basically threw all my books off the desk. And the teacher got upset with me, and I believe they yelled at me. Again, I don't remember the outcome of that, other than I remember I was mad I threw the books down, and I remember that it upset the teacher quite a bit, and so my parents were called, of course. Also, I think around this time is when they started me at an after-school program. The problem was at this time, at an after-school program, when I had autism, I was different and I was strange. So basically, I would talk about things that I knew, which I think at the time might have been Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I don't remember what I was talking about at that time. I do remember two incidents that stick out distinctly. One of them was chasing after girls, as you will notice that is a pattern through here, but was chasing after the girls. The other two, there were two other instances that stick out. One of them was a kid who I thought was my friend, and I don't remember where I was or what I was doing, if I was taking a shower. I don't know what happened, but somehow he had my clothes and threw them up in a tree. And when he did this, I walked out. I think it was either my underwear or naked, one of the two. And I was made fun of, and I got in trouble for it, even though the kid had thrown my clothes in the trees. So I thought that was very strange, and I couldn't figure out why everybody was laughing at me and why somebody would be so mean to do that to me. And then the next incident from this after school program I remember is, I don't remember what caused it. This may have been the same instant, may have been something different, but they had a college student, a bigger college student there, and I remember that he was basically sitting on me, holding me down, because I wanted to do something or go somewhere, and they said no, I think. Again, I don't know, I don't remember the full details. I just remember that this adult male who was heavier was sitting on me. Think about that for a second. That would never fly today. And knowing that I had a disability, and of course, because of my disability and people being either more popular than I was or being what I'll call normal, and I use quotations because nobody's ever really normal, it seemed like I had a target on my back, especially after having my clothes thrown up in a tree and having this college person sit on me. And technically he was assaulting somebody with a disability, but they were holding me down. And again, I don't remember why. But mom and dad took care of it, and then after that, I was gone from that after school program. During that time, I was into video games and movies, and I still am into video games and movies, but I actually left to go shoot a commercial for a local video store. And my parents knew something was wrong because I didn't want to leave there, and it wasn't just because of the arcade games. I may not have told them this, but I didn't want to leave because I didn't want to go back to that program where I was constantly tortured and tormented by other kids. So after that, the next place I had was 5th grade. And 5th grade is where I met one of my personal favorite teachers, the one who actually taught me that I could get along with people, and I didn't know this at the time, but looking back, he was trying to steer me and keep me on the right path so I wouldn't lash out at people or be upset, and he was trying to teach me that, hey, you can be funny and people can laugh with you and not at you. And he did. He is one of my favorite teachers, and to this day, I regret one of the issues I had where something occurred. He said something, and I remember he told me to come down the stairs, and I didn't want to, and so basically I did the screw you sign to him. And I remember I told him to shove it at one point. So he then grabbed me by the arm and took me to the principal's office, and I had never seen him get that mad before. Again, I don't remember why I did this. I don't remember what exactly was said or what was going on. I just remember that it would seem like I had issues with authority, but that wasn't really the case. It was people would say things that would set me off, and I have worked on my anger issues. And most people with autism do have anger issues, so keep that in mind, but with me, I've tried to work them out, so I'm not yelling, I'm not cursing up a storm, I'm not telling people to shove it anymore. So he took me to the principal's office, and I talked with the principal at that time. I don't really remember too much of that discussion. And then I do remember in 6th grade, I got in big trouble, and I was completely and 100% set up, and what I said I should not have said, and I know this now, but kids were talking about different things in art class. The theme throughout my entire time at school was being set up mostly because people knew how I would react or they knew all this other stuff. Also, with art class, it was very hard for me and very hard for people with autism and Asperger's as well because if, at least in my case, I don't know about everybody, if I can't do it on the first or second try, I get frustrated. And when I get frustrated, I don't want to do it anymore. So for instance, with art, I couldn't draw a straight line. I still can't draw a straight line to save my life. I had to start typing everything because I had teachers flat out tell me, I can't read your writing. Which would also cause some issues along the way because people would make fun of me for my handwriting. However, people with autism and Asperger's have poor fine motor skills, so our writing is going to suck. So what ended up happening was I got frustrated with art, and then I know at some point I have taken guitar lessons, I have taken piano lessons, I have taken karate lessons, or taekwondo lessons, I mean. And because I can't get them on the first try, I had lots of problems, and I was very frustrated. And realistically, nobody can get anything down on the first try. But for me, it's really hard not to because why is it if I take guitar lessons, there's somebody like Eddie Van Halen who can play guitar really well, but I don't sound like him. And that's just how my mind works. That's how people with autism's mind work. I see Eddie Van Halen playing, my mind doesn't go, he's had years of practice. My mind goes, oh, he took a lesson. And if I take a lesson, I'll sound like him. That's not the case. So after the incident in 6th grade, I went to junior high where that's where most of my problems occurred. In junior high, for my 7th grade year, I had a counselor that I was fond of pass away. And that affected me because I would talk to him about being made fun of, and he was trying to teach me, don't strike out at people, don't lash out. Come talk to me, and this way you won't be made fun of as much. And I thought the principal that year was the worst I'd ever had. I thought I had a target on my back, because this is the same time where I was getting made fun of, where the incident, as stated in the previous video, I was thrown into a water fountain. And also at this point I had started watching pro wrestling, and I joined the wrestling team. Now there was an instance with the wrestling team that happened that affects me to this day and isn't right, but nothing happened other than to me. On the wrestling team, because I watched pro wrestling, they put a chair on my ankle, and a few of them proceeded to jump on it because I liked pro wrestling. Which, in pro wrestling, that's fine. In pro wrestling, that's fine, but in real life, it sprained my ankle. Not fractured it, but sprained it. None of them got in trouble. And this would happen through my wrestling. Is that nobody got in trouble, and because you had to be shirtless, I would take off my shirt, and when I was born with failure to thrive. So I have a feeding tube. Problem is that spot ripped open. Now, that's why I quit wrestling. However, the fact that I have this feeding tube spot, I was called a freak. I was asked why I had a second belly button. And yes, kids are cruel, but this was just too much. Putting a chair on someone's leg to, try to break their ankle. Granted, all I did was sprain it, but that's not right. Nobody should have to be treated like that, and nobody should ever be treated like that. So, with that done in 7th grade, I moved on to 8th, and 8th grade was what I call my nightmare year. For years, I blocked out everything that happened in 8th grade. Reason being because it was not fun for me. School was not fun. I would rather stay home sick, and I told Mom when I had some surgery, and it was a surgery to repair the feeding tube spot after it had ripped open. I said, I'd rather stay home because at least here I'm not getting made fun of, and that's true. That's why to this day, if there's a party, I tend not to attend unless I'm kind of forced to, or unless it's a very close friend, because I don't like getting made fun of. And after all those years in school, where I have been made fun of numerous times, it's hard for me to think that I'll go to a party and not be made fun of. So I went into 8th grade, and the principal there was worse than 7th. The principal there had it out for me, and this is when I first started to learn that the game was rigged at my school. It was rigged toward the rich, toward kids who may not be rich, but they came from affluent families, and I didn't. So I was constantly in trouble. One of the bigger instances that sticks out in my mind is walking through a hallway and accidentally walking through a hallway, and as I'm walking, this girl turns around and said that I hit her on the butt, and I touched her butt, which I didn't. And I was pulled immediately to the principal's office and put in an in-school detention. I didn't do anything, but for some reason that principal would not believe a word I said. This is the same one who, when I got thrown into the same principal who, when I got thrown into a water fountain, asked what I did to piss him off. When I got a message on a MSN Messenger of all things, which, if you don't know what that is, look it up. It was a thing. It's not anymore. So I got a message that 2 girls had lured me into having basically a explicit conversation, and then the next day I was in the principal's office because they turned me in for sexual harassment. My dad took care of the situation because we had the whole message saved, because my parents knew that part of the issues with autism is if somebody starts speaking about something, then I will turn around, or a person with autism will turn around and think it's okay for us to speak about that. So if people are saying personal things, my mind goes, well, I can say something personal or ask them a personal question because they're talking about it, not realizing, that if it's a group of girls, probably not a good idea. I know this now. Back then I didn't, and that even followed me through some of college. So I got in trouble for that. I also remember, too, distinctly that I got a message of a guy saying he would beat me up at my locker because this other girl, through Messenger as well, said she would meet me at my locker to date me and do explicit things, and I believed him. And I believed her, and then I get a message from him saying he will kill me, and he showed up at my locker, and when I turned it in, I was told by this principal that it happened off campus, they can't do anything, even though I had been turned in for sexual harassment for something that happened off school grounds. And I thought this was very weird, but at the same time didn't think too much about it. The principal I knew had it out for me the day that she did something that caused me to get into trouble, and it wasn't my fault. What happened was she had pulled me into a room to talk with her, and she was yelling at me. I don't remember why. I remember she was yelling at me, and I told her, why don't you just leave me the fuck alone? My exact words. And she said, that's it, go home. And I go, what? She goes, go home, you're going home. And she had my special ed teacher, who I had one special ed class for homeroom, that was it. I didn't have like a special ed class for the whole thing. I just needed somebody to help me stay focused, or somebody who could rearrange questions. On that aside, if I take a test or if I look confused because you ask me a question, what people with autism need is they need somebody to arrange the question in a way that makes sense to them. I can't think of any good examples off the top of my head, but I know in tests sometimes the question didn't make sense to me, but if you would rearrange it so it would, I would understand it. I would understand it better. But anyway, I told this principal to leave me the fuck alone, and when I did so, she sent me home, and my special ed teacher watched me walk home. I told my dad what had happened, and my dad went in and talked to the principal, and the principal goes, no, I never said that. Jerry left on his own. Where it all came to a head, as stated previously, was during this issue, was during the issue where I was turned in with stating I was going to kill myself. However, as much as I'd like to say, oh no, that wasn't the case and I was just joking, and people say that all the time, well, that's the thing. I don't think I was joking probably at the time, but I didn't. I didn't want to get past junior high. I didn't. Life was horrible. I was constantly belittled. I was constantly turned in for stuff I didn't do. At one point, I was turned in for intimidating somebody for making an obscene gesture, and the girl that turned me in was laughing about it at the time and then said that I intimidated her and sexually harassed her, which was weird to me. So, I had an in-school suspension that day. To let you know how much I was in trouble in junior high, I was able to read the English to Spanish dictionary, and I was in there so much that I had the thing memorized, and I knew a lot of Spanish heading into my Spanish class in freshman year of high school. So, it all came, like I said, it all came to a head, and whether I was joking or not, I had tried to commit suicide several times. Because during one show my mom did, I climbed the top of a roof and threatened to jump off, and this guy walked out and goes, do you need a rope? I can help you climb higher. So I jumped. I injured my arm and my shoulder. And the thing is if somebody has depression, regardless what it's from, you shouldn't tell somebody that. So that was one time. There was another time that I did try to shoot myself with a BB gun. And at the last moment, I turned it away, and I broke my parents' anniversary clock. I don't think I've ever told them that. This is the first time, if they watch this, they'll know this. And then after that was shattered, I took the glass and I started cutting my wrist, hoping I would bleed out and die. Because I couldn't take being made fun of. Where I was happiest was at home, because nobody was helping me at school. Nobody was listening. I would talk to people, and I would constantly get, oh, kids are just cruel, or, oh, they're just being kids. No, they weren't. I was a target, and I don't know why. I did not like being a target. Nobody would. The fact that I watched wrestling shouldn't have made a difference. The fact that I was a little awkward shouldn't have made a difference. The fact that people would turn me in for any little thing because they think it's funny should never have happened. With junior high, though, like I said in that last video, that was the last straw. They expelled me. They expelled me for the comment of me trying to commit suicide. They took all the weapons out of my dad's house. They took, out of mom and dad's, I should say. They took the books that I was reading and used it against me, and to be honest, it didn't matter what would have happened. I could have just said nothing. I could have just stood there. They just wanted me out. The best I can guess is they didn't understand what my disability was, so they didn't want me there. People fear what they don't understand. And I'm thinking that's part of the problem. So they wanted me out. I was out. I was gone. This way I was expelled. I was sent to a psychiatric facility where I was diagnosed with autism. And I do have to admit that I did slam somebody up against a locker while in junior high because I got tired of taking people's shit. Granted, I admit the person that I slammed was a female, and I do not condone violence against females, and I immediately regretted it. I also slammed another kid up against the locker because he said he would beat me up. Here's the thing. At this time, people were slammed up against lockers and nothing happened to them. I was slammed up against about 40 different lockers. Nothing happened to them. I do it and I'm in an in-school detention. So, there's that. But I went to this psychiatric facility, was diagnosed with autism, and after that, we started seeing a psychiatrist who started helping me through the issues, and found a psychologist here in town who happened to work out at the college, and I started talking to her, and she helped me 100%. She helped me realize who my friends were, who my friends weren't, and she also helped me realize something else. And it took me this long to realize it with her. If somebody has autism and they have a horrible friend, the person with autism isn't going to care. It won't be until later that they find out. With me, the person had to do something really horrible, and I had to see it with my own eyes before I realized that that's a problem. So, after that, we ended up getting the psychologist and a lawyer to get me back freshman year of high school. One of the terms to get me back into high school was having a one-on-one aide. The one-on-one aide's name will be Senor Flamingos, and he will get that joke. He'll either find it the funniest thing in the world, or I will get an angry message. But Senor Flamingos is his name, and he is one of the few people who I actually considered a close friend. He's more of a big brother, and he always will be to me. Not only was he helping me with things like when I would forget questions, or not forget questions, but when I would need questions flipped or put in another way so I could understand them. He was there to talk with me, and he actually, one of the first things he did was he asked me if I'd seen the movie Pink Flamingos, because he knew my taste in film, and I had said no. He told me to go rent it, so I did, and I was grossed out, disgusted, and thought it was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. And I liked it. So I had seen Pink Flamingos, and then we also started talking over different comedians, because when you're getting made fun of and there's not really much to laugh at, you're going to want to laugh at something that's not yourself or other people. So I started watching Comedy Central and liked a bunch of different comedians, and he happened to like one of the same ones I did, whose name was Mitch Hedberg. And Mitch Hedberg was a dry comedian, but I found him hysterical. I still do to this day. Mitch Hedberg sadly passed away while I was in high school, oddly enough, which was very weird to me. But this Senor Flamingos would go to bat for me. He would talk to me. He would be able to let me vent to him about certain things. And there's one of my favorite memories with him was I would have to leave a room to take a test. I'm going to address this now. That is a bad thing to do, at least for me. I don't know about everybody, but what would happen, and some people may consider this cheating, I don't think it is, but when I'm taken out of a room, for some reason, I forget everything. For instance, if I had a Spanish test, while I was in Spanish class, I would remember Spanish, I would remember how to write stuff. The minute you took me out of that classroom, it all left my mind. I don't know if it's because I associated Spanish with the room. I don't know what, but to this day, even when I was in college, they would want me to take a test away from the classroom, and I would do worse on those tests than the tests that I actually took in said classroom. So for me, being in a classroom with a test was a lot easier and helped me a little more. But anyway, back to Senor Flamingos, one of my favorite memories is, for some reason, I could not remember the term for boat on a Spanish test. And I'm sitting there going, the term is botica in my mind, and he goes, well, do you know the answer? And I go, no. He goes, well, why don't you flip a coin? And to be fair, that was one of the only questions I got right, was from a coin toss on whether or not the answer was botica. Be fair, it was right, and I flipped a coin for it, but that's one of my favorite memories because of how silly and insane it was. Also around this time, too, I started doing theater in high school, but I was told I would nail auditions and not get cast. I will talk more about that when I go into what happened with college. But each year with Senor Flamingos, each year that would go by, I would have him less. By my senior year, I think I had him for maybe one class, and that was it. And it was mostly because of him and the fact that I was seeing a psychologist about my autism and about different issues. It was due to the fact that I had Senor Flamingos and was seeing a psychologist, and mom and dad were understanding what was going on a little more, and I didn't have a target on my back, which is what helped me get through high school. So, Senor Flamingos, I know you're out there. I know you're watching. Thank you, buddy. You still mean the world to me, and you're still my big brother. I was treated with a tad bit more respect. I was still made fun of. I was still called a freak. I was still told I had two belly buttons, but it wasn't as bad. Um, During high school, the only other instances that I can really recall that happened were I had a seizure, and my seizure started happening during my times in high school. During one of my seizures, a police officer who was at the school at this time went to help me, and instead of like putting something under my head, while I was shaking, he grabbed me by my shirt, so my head was constantly bouncing off the concrete floor, and if I remember correctly, it caused a mild concussion. Now, flash forward a year or a few months later, I don't remember, and I have a seizure in study hall, and he refuses to help me because he said I turned him in last time for hurting me. Which was true, because when you have a seizure, you put a pillow or your hand under their head instead of making sure their head hits concrete. So I did turn him in for that because it hurt, and I did have a mild concussion from it. So that was one of the few instances, other than when somebody pushed me in front of a bus and I wanted to tear his head apart. Because part of it was he made fun of wrestling. The last part was he pushed me in front of a bus. And by doing so, he almost killed me. And by doing this, I ended up trying to fight him, and it took 3 principals to hold me back while this kid just laughed in my face. And honestly, that's why I hated high school. That's why I hated junior high. That's why I hated school. Because I felt like everybody was laughing at me. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I was made fun of because I would ask out someone. I was made fun of because I would watch wrestling. Honestly, I don't think it would have mattered. At one point, I had to have a nasal spray because I had an infection, and people were asking me if I was drinking alcohol. And I don't drink. I have had a sip of alcohol, but for the most part, I don't drink. Well, actually, I don't. I had 1 sip of alcohol on my 21st birthday, and then I had alcohol that was given to me then that went bad by my 23rd. I hadn't drank it. I don't like alcohol. I don't like cigarettes. I am mostly straight edge. I do have some caffeine, but not much. But these kids were just unneedlessly cruel, and in the shower, they would make fun of me to the point where I wouldn't shower at school. I lived fairly close to the school, so I'd go home and I'd shower, because at least there I wasn't made fun of. And one of the other parts in high school was I was constantly told that my seizures were fake, and that wasn't true. I was told that by the nurses. Well, not the nurses, one nurse. She said I was faking it, and I can hear what happens when I have my seizures. So, but anyway, this is what happened with high school. This is why I struggled so much. And know that if somebody has autism or something like that, that it will get better. Because like I said, by my senior year in high school, I wasn't made fun of as much, or at least to my face. I probably was behind my back. But people seem to enjoy me and like me a little better. So it does get better if you're in junior high. Next time, I'll be going into what happened with college. That video will be released in October sometime, because I need to work on a video on the Toxic Avenger and Horror Hound coming up, and another review that's in between there, which will be a lot of fun. So I'll be working on those. My email address right here, I am Mr. Cheeseball at gmail.com. And if you have a question, email me. Once I get a certain amount of questions, maybe a good 10 to 20 or so, I will answer them in a video. And this way, anybody who has questions, I can answer. Again, please keep in mind, these are my experiences. I don't know if anybody has gone through them, if everybody who has autism has gone through them. I know that probably being picked on and beat up and the trust issues, I'm pretty sure people have, but I'm not sure about certain quirks or other stuff that I've mentioned. So please share, subscribe. Um, these videos are really hard for me to make because I have to relive some of them. One of the other things I forgot to mention was I was first diagnosed as ADHD, which is not the case, because if you have ADHD, you can't focus. If you give me a book, a video game, a TV show, a movie, I can focus. But I couldn't focus on schoolwork, and I will go with mostly because when I'm getting made fun of, why would I want to do something that would remind me of that? But I was given Ritalin, and that just made me extremely emotional. And the diagnosis was wrong. I have autism and Asperger's syndrome, and I can see that now. Back then, everybody just thought I had ADHD, but the medicine wasn't working, and I would be focused, but I would be extremely emotional and like a zombie. So, just so you know, I had been put on Risperdal, I had been put on Dexedrine, I had been put on several medications, and each one of them gave me different side effects. So, again, I hope this helps people, and please watch my channel for the next autism video. But after this, it's up to Mr. Cheeseball. It's back to my Mr. Cheeseball reviews with the Toxic Avenger and comparing Toxic Avenger editions